Hello, I'm Alastair Daniel and I'm a London-based storyteller who is also a proud man of Kent. Or should that be Kentish man? Well, it doesn't matter. Well, actually, it does matter. Of course it matters. And if you want to know why it matters if you are Kentish or of Kent, then you'll find out in the opening part, The Coming of the White Horse, of my show Invicta, Lore and Legend of the Garden of England. For Kent is the Garden of England. Kent, the county in the bottom right-hand corner of England. Kent, the county nearest mainland Europe, which means everyone's been through it. The Romans came through Kent. The Vikings came through Kent. The Normans came through Kent. And in Invicta, I take the audience on a journey, north to south and east to west of that county. In the north, we learn of the inadvisability of taking on an elderly wise woman. In the south, by comparison, we learn of the transformative power of young love. In the west, we find the cursed serpent of Sevenoaks that waits for visitors. And in the east, in Canterbury, well, of course, we find Chaucer. And one of Chaucer's tales of how really it's not a good idea when you wake up in a drunken stupor to go searching for the person of death. And all of these stories are held together by my reminiscences of growing up in the county. So I'll speak of why I never got to eat cod's kneecaps at the seaside in Kent, and how poor automotive engineering of the 1970s connects with a love of Gothic architecture. As a complete show, Invicta, Lore and Legend of the Garden of England is intended to be around an hour, and that's how I performed it at the Hastings Storytelling Festival and at Best Tellers in Copenhagen. But it can go up to an hour and a half. There are plenty of stories to fill that kind of length of time, and also individual stories can be taken out and go into an ensemble evening. What follows is a showreel of extracts from Invicta, Lore and Legend of the Garden of England. Some of the extracts are from individual stories that I've performed as part of ensemble events. There is an extract from a complete performance, and there's also one filmed to camera. I hope you enjoy, and I hope you wish to book Invicta, Lore and Legend of the Garden of England. And the last sight of that treasure could not have given him comfort as the pommel of the sword cracked his skull, and he folded. He was still breathing, but I don't know what consciousness he had of what was happening to him, because if he had any consciousness, he would have felt himself being pulled along the length of the floorboards of the high gallery until he heard the sound of windows being opened. He would have felt himself being manhandled up. And then, if he had consciousness, he would have felt fleetingly the freedom of flight and the cool air on his skin until he hit the hard, cold water of the moat. So, the bells were ringing. The groom was waiting in the church with his family and the bride's family and the rest of the village, and they had the glorious sound, ding 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 ding. And the bride walked in, and the organ struck up, and she walked to the front of the church, and she stood next to the groom, and up in the tower, looking through the spire hole, the smallest member of the team shouted, "She's here!" And the captain of the bell team said, "Stand," which means stop the bells. And so all the bell ringers, one after the other, pulled on their ropes and stopped them. When I say them, I mean the ropes, because despite the fact the ropes had stopped, the bells kept ringing. Ding 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 ding.
Earth, okay? Earth's crust in places is a bit thin. What happens if the Earth's crust is too thin? Volcanoes. And what comes out?
Lava.
You say lava, Peter. You're using technical language, which is great, But why don't you just say, the fires of horrid hell? Because where the earth's crust is thinnest, that is where it is closest to horrid hell, and where we are only a few metres away from the very kingdom of Satan himself. As you may be aware, the Archbishop of the Anglican Communion, the Prime Archbishop of the Anglican Communion, is from where? Canterbury. Canterbury. Do you know why? I'll tell you why. If you said volcano, have you heard of the volcano of Chatham? The tsunami of Strood? The earthquake of Rochester? No. Because it is Canterbury Cathedral, that great house of prayer, that prevents hell breaking through at that thin place. Because underneath Kent is not just hell, it is the very throne chamber of Satan. And Satan sits upon his throne immediately below the church of Newington.
The room went silent, and everybody sat, holding their breath to see what the old woman would say in response to the anger of her lord. And she simply smiled and said, "But my lord, I'm only doing what you wished." And Sir Henry said, "How can you say that? I invited you to my feast. I offered you marchpane, I offered you wassail, I offered you ginger snaps, and you pour the wassail into your hat. You rub the marchpane into your clothing, and you stuff the ginger snaps down the front of your dress." And the old woman said, "But my lord, I came here only a few days ago to give you my acceptance of your invitation. And I stepped into your great hall, and you said to me, 'Get out.' You said to your servants, 'Do not allow that back in here.' And yet here I am sitting with you. And the only thing that has changed is my clothing. And therefore, my lord, it must be that you didn't want me at your feast. You simply wanted this fine clothing. And so, my lord, since the clothing is your guest, I feed it with your food and your drink."
Now, friars, remember, obedience, chastity, and poverty. Poverty. If you're that poor, how do you get to be that rotund? Yes, he was wearing a poor friar's habit, but it was of suspiciously good cloth. But Sir Robert saw the friar approaching and said, "Good friar, brother, will you say a prayer for this poor soul who lies before us under this blanket?" And the friar came close, and his nostrils flared at the smell of decay and death. And he said, "Of course, it would be my honor to ease this man's journey from purgatory to heaven, to make his journey to eternal bliss that much easier." And Sir Robert smiled and said, "Thank you, brother." And the brother said, "For the usual fee." Sir Robert said, "I'm sorry. What was that, brother? Brother who was sworn to chastity, obedience, and poverty?" And the brother said, "My lord, the church gives freely of its prayer, but it is only right that there should be some recompense for the work of the church in proclaiming the kingdom of God. The usual fee, my lord, will buy a prayer for this man." And that is the story of the drenched man, and that is how I have told it to you.